Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are welcoming Chuck Marohn of Strong Towns. He is the president and founder of the Strong Towns organization. And just to give you a little bit of background for those people who are not familiar with PS21, who's hosting the event tonight, Portsmouth Smart Growth for the 21st Century is an independent, volunteer nonprofit that presents ideas and encourages discussion and policy development around planning issues in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and the Seacoast. Our goal is to support a vibrant, sustainable, livable, and walkable community consistent with the principles of smart growth, the historic nature of Portsmouth in the context of the 21st century. We really strive at PS21 to make all of our events free and open to the public. And as such, we rely on your generosity and the generosity of our sponsors to donate to bring in these great national thought leaders like Mr. Marohn this evening. And we've been really lucky to bring in some really great speakers, but we rely on funding from you all and from our sponsors who we'd like to acknowledge as well. You can find out more information about PS21. We post videos of all of our events and presentations on our website. And you can also, most importantly, make a donation on the website, which is ps21.info. We also recommend you check that out for the additional information and to go back and watch the video or to watch videos of past events. We would especially like to thank our sponsors who made this event possible. Our event sponsors this evening are Portsmouth Housing Authority, Piscataqua Savings Bank, Chinburg Properties, the City of Portsmouth, and the Jeffrey E. Clark and Martha Fuller Clark Fund of the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation. And we'd also, yeah, definitely. And we'd also like to thank the organizations that partnered with us on this group to help, partner on this event with us for this event, including the Seacoast Media Group, PortsmouthNH.com, Corway Film Institute, the Sailmakers House, and a special thanks to Sarah Reitzman and the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast, who helped support us in this event. As I was mentioning, we're really excited to have Chuck Marohn here this evening. We've been talking about hopefully bringing him to Portsmouth for several years now, and so this evening is sort of a culmination of many years of talking about it. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Strong Towns, it was an organization started in 2008 to support a model of development that encourages America's cities, towns, and neighborhoods to become financially strong and resilient. Chuck Marohn is a professional engineer and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and presents these Strong Town concepts across North America. He was just telling me all the places he'd been to leading up to tonight's event. And we're very lucky that he's willing to keep traveling and doing these events and sharing his knowledge with us because he's spending time away from his family, so we all certainly appreciate that. And I should also mention he was named by the urban planning website Planetizen as one of the 10 most influential urbanists of all time, which is pretty amazing. So tonight, Chuck has put together a special presentation for us in Portsmouth. He did a little bit of a tour this afternoon. And so he's going to hit on a number of different points, but really focusing on the relationship between cities, growth, and transportation, and maybe a few other gems thrown in there as well. So without any further ado, let me welcome Chuck Marohn.
Thank you. This is going to be a little strange of a presentation. When I actually realized I've been on the road for 11 days straight. I've been home a couple times in there, and one of my daughters went with for a couple days on one, so it's not like I've been without interacting with my wife and kids for 11 days straight. But when I go out on the road, they put together for me a series of notes, like here's what we would like you to talk about. And I went through that before I got here today. And then I started to go around and see your neighborhoods and talk to people and interact. And I went back and I threw the whole thing away and I did something completely different. So this is, I was thinking like, what do you call this? And I'm like, it's just the Strong Towns Potpourri Night. In case you don't know, you all are, and I will admit, because I've been on the road 11 days straight, not knowing this myself until yesterday, that you are one of our Final Four competitors. Every year, yeah, it's pretty cool. Every year we do this March Madness bracket style competition to name the strongest town. And I'm often asked, like, you know, what are you trying to do with this? A few years ago, there was a website in the urban planning space, and I won't mention them, but they would do this bracket style competition that I thought was really negative. It was like, name the worst, and I won't say what it was because you'll figure out who they are. But I'm not trying to diss on them. But like, name the worst this, and they'd have a bracket style, and at the end they would crown like the worst thing in cities in the country. And I said, you know, there's so many positive things going on with strong towns. There's so many positive things going on in cities. There's so many cities that are working at this very hard. We don't want to necessarily recognize the best place, like the place that has figured it out. But we want to recognize a place that is really doing great work. They might not be shiny and perfect. It might not all be polished up and marble. But this is a place that's like rolled up their sleeves and said, we're gonna do this. And so we started this competition 4 years ago. This is our 4th year. The first year I was kind of terrified because I didn't know what we would get. We wound up having a little town in Pennsylvania that won the competition that year, and when I went there, I fell in love with this place. Like this place is fantastic. The next 2 years have both been cities in Michigan. Last year was Muskegon, Michigan, a city that I want to say at one point was 80,000 people. With the deindustrialization of the place, they're now down to like 30,000. So this is not a place on paper you would say is a very strong town, right? It's kind of struggling, a lot of empty buildings. But the things that they were doing, the innovative things that they were trying, the way they were going about this was so inspirational. And I got a chance to go there and be part of their conversation as well. We're now down to 4 teams. You all are going against Safety Harbor, yeah, that's what it is, in Florida. I will admit to you all here, and you can boo me if you want. I don't vote in this. We let our members vote, which is great, and our members are weighted a little bit higher in their voting. I personally don't vote, but there was something intriguing to me as a Minnesotan about a Florida matchup, because in case you don't know this, Minnesota is cold and Florida is warm. And part of the deal of this competition is that whoever wins, I go there. So as the brackets were being set up, we had 3 Florida teams and 1 Southern California team. And I thought, well, this is looking okay. It's since warmed up a little bit in my part of the world. I have an insane amount to get through tonight. And so we're going to go till about 8:30. I'm going to try to leave like time for conversation. Every place I've gone this week, we've had a lot of conversation. So I'm going to try to leave a little bit, but I've packed like an insane amount of this. So I'm going to try to get through it, and I may rush, and I may talk a little fast, and I may not take as many tangents as I usually do. So just bear with me, and we'll try to leave a lot of time at the end for conversation. Very early on in Strong Towns, kind of the way this whole thing got started is I was a bad engineer who went and became a planner, and then I was a bad planner who started to get fired from all my cities because I told them they were going broke. They didn't believe me. We didn't see eye to eye on that, and I'm better off probably not doing that work anymore. But the early stuff that I published on our website were financial analysis of places that I knew and worked with, like this development right here. This is a development built in the mid-1990s. It's a residential development, dead-end cul-de-sac, kind of the standard suburban fare we've been building for the last 70 years. This is a dead-end road with residential homes. When it was built, the city paid half the cost, the property owners paid the other half. I sat down and did the financial analysis and said, how long will it take the city to recoup the money that they put into this road? The answer is 37 years. As an engineer, I can tell you the road won't last 37 years. It's going to take the city 37 years just to get their initial money back. They're on the hook for fixing this over and over and over again. Where does that money come from? Here's another development. This one was rather maddening. This city had an insane backlog of road maintenance. And the richest neighborhood in town would show up at every meeting. All the people would bitch and complain. Sorry, excuse my. They would sit and complain about how their road was in poor shape. This was built in the mid 1980s. So when this was built, the developer paid for it. The developer rolled that cost, of course, into the home sale. People have included that in their mortgage. They've been paying taxes to the city to maintain their road. Amongst all the needs that the city had, they prioritized this one. The cost was $354,000 to go out and fix the road. We asked the question, how long is it going to take to recoup that from these people? If you look at this, this is a dead-end road, cul-de-sac, curve. There's no through traffic, no commercial traffic. The only reason you go there is to go to one of these homes. So if the homes weren't there, no road. It took 79 years. It would take 79 years for the city to recoup their costs. We asked if we were going to raise taxes on this kind of one wealthy enclave in this very poor city to make this work, what would that mean? It would mean a 46% increase in taxes right now, plus annual increases of 3% over inflation every year going forward for the next 3 decades. We also pointed out that this was just the roadway. The sewer, the water, the storm sewer, all this, like way, way, way more expensive. Here's a business park that I had worked on. This was built in the mid-1990s. It was completely built out. The city wanted to build a brand new park, the same exact size and configuration on property they own right next door. We looked at it and said, okay, if we could build the same thing for the same amount of money and get the same amount of return, how would that work out? Well, it doesn't work out. We ran the numbers in every scenario we could figure out. The only one where the numbers actually balanced is where we assumed that the entire new park would be built out within 12 months. Every dollar of revenue coming in would go to pay the bond. So someone else would have to pay for the police protection, the fire protection, all the other services that would be needed, plowing the snow, all that. Every business that was built in the new park would be non-subsidized and would be a full taxpayer. So no churches, no nonprofits, no school district, no maintenance buildings for the county. We got all that in the current park. And if all that happened, it would still take almost 3 decades for the city to break even. That's 3 decades in like the most optimistic scenario imaginable, which was not ever going to happen. This is what we discovered. And this is kind of the earliest, I think, insight of Strong Towns, one of the more powerful insights that I want to start this presentation with, because I'm going to contrast our post-war development pattern with our pre-depression development pattern for the rest of the evening. And this kind of epitomizes that post-war development pattern. If you look at the cash flow of a single development, what you will see is that we are very good at building new stuff. In fact, the post-war era is an era of growth. We switched our economy so that we were going to be focused on new growth. How do we continue to grow? You guys may not know this, but there's an election coming up. And all these politicians generally go to states such as yours, I've heard, and they tell you how they're going to grow the economy, right? Grow, grow, grow. We have an obsession with growth, and that's because of this dynamic here. When we can go out and build a new development, residential development, commercial development, we've figured out ways to pay for this stuff up front. And cities, especially cities with property tax, experience this as growth. The developer goes out and pays for the roads and the streets and the curb and the sidewalks. They pay for the pipes and the pumps and the valves and the meters. They roll that into the sale price. From a city standpoint, we agree to take over all that infrastructure. We agree that we will maintain it and take care of it. We'll provide police protection and fire protection and all the services that are needed if you do the growth. And from the short-term cash standpoint, this is incredible. This is a cash flow diagram of a brand new development. And what you see is that once it goes in, the taxes start to roll in, and year after year after year, we're cash flow positive. A 5-year-old road isn't cost you anything. A A 10-year-old sidewalk doesn't cost you anything. A 15-year-old pipe doesn't cost you anything. So year after year after year, you have money coming in, you feel very rich. When you get out a generation, though, you get out, in this example, 25 years, and you have to go back and make good on those promises. You got to fix that road, you got to fix that pipe, you got to replace those valves and meters. What you find is that the cash flow you've had the entire time is inadequate, and you run far into deficit. Now, cities don't experience one development, right? They experience a collection of developments. And so when we can stack growth upon growth upon growth year after year, we get a 25-year chart that looks something like this. You've got one development come online, and then another development, and then another development, another development, and they all have immediate kind of sugar high cash benefit that we can use to balance our budgets, to fix our parks, to increase our transits, whatever we want to do with that money, it's cash for us. The growth gives us a lot of cash. And all those liabilities are way, way out in the future. This is a model of growth in successive years, the same, this development over and over and over. And what you find is when you get to the end, yes, you start to have costs come due, but it's not a big deal, right? Because you've had all this growth, you've had all this success, you've had all this prosperity. You've got money there to go take care of the problems. The thing is, when you continue to run this out in time, if you lose money on every transaction, you don't make it up in volume. Eventually, the weight of those accumulated liabilities start to wear you down. They start to grow, they start to add up, and even if we can accelerate our rate of growth, it's not quick enough to overcome this drag of liabilities. As I come into your town today, as I have visited cities all over New Hampshire this week, in my prior trips here, what I see is that you have a lot of the traditional historic development pattern, and we're going to talk about that a lot here, but you have built a lot of this drag on your system. You have built lots and lots and lots of it. And what that has done is it's created, again, this kind of drag on you, where you have these continually accumulating liabilities that now you're having to address. And of course, our solution to this is what? We go build more with more growth, right? I want to talk, and this is the funky part that I added here that I wasn't intending to chat about, but I think this is an important conversation, particularly for you, because you have this dynamic where you're building out on the edge in kind of a hyper crazy way. At the same time, you're seeing large redevelopment projects in your core, and there's a contrast there. There's a similarity and a contrast, and I want to highlight both of those for you so that you see this in its similarities and its differences. A complex adaptive system, we can think of forest ecosystems as complex adaptive systems. We can think of traditional development patterns as complex adaptive systems. Cities in their traditional form. And when I'm going to use this word traditional, what I mean is the way we built cities pre-Great Depression. There's a change that happened in this continent during the Great Depression and after World War II. When I talk about traditional development patterns, I'm talking about the way we built cities prior to that. They had the characteristics as human habitat of a complex adaptive system. Complex adaptive systems have really four main traits that make them different from systems that are merely complicated. Complex systems emerge, so they are systems where instead of planning out what will be, the individual parts emerge and form and create something. You can think of a forest ecosystem as an example. Each individual part of the system experiences feedback, so they all act independently and are influenced by the things around them, and they are able to adapt their strategy. They're able to adapt and change based on the feedback that they receive. If you think of a forest, you can think of a bare spot where the sun shines through, and you can go visit that one day, and then you can go back a year later and you'll see that plants have grown into that to capture that sun. That then changes the interactions of other plants that were getting that sun that are lower complex adaptive systems change and evolve to stress, to stimulus, and their properties are said to be emergent. The order that is created is an order that emerges as opposed to an order that is imposed. A Rube Goldberg machine is very complicated, right? But it is not complex. A Rube Goldberg machine acts in a very specific way. We press something here, the little thing swings over, knocks this down. We can see what happens, and if we spend enough time and enough brain power looking at it, we can figure out exactly how it's going to work. But it's never going to change and adapt and work differently. It has one mechanical way that it works, and that is the only way that it works, and no amount of stress or change or adaptation is going to occur to make it work in a different way. If you think of a watch or a computer or a car, these are complicated systems, but they are not complex systems. Nothing emerges from them. They are, in a sense, mechanical systems. A complex system is something like the economy. The economy is one of these things where an order emerges. Why do we have market crashes? We have market crashes because for reasons that are unforeseeable, people at some point, or algorithms today, I guess, lose confidence in the market. They start to sell. Why do we have market booms? Because people believe that if they buy a stock or they buy a bond, the value is going to go up. When we listen to politicians or market makers at the Federal Reserve or on Wall Street, oftentimes they'll go and they'll talk about how great the economy is. And even if they're saying something that's not true and that they know is not true, they'll often talk this way because what happens when they talk positively about the economy? We start to believe it, and we start to act by taking money out of our pockets and spending. We borrow money. When we feel confident, we act in a certain way, and guess what that action does? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It emerges in a successful economy. Quite the opposite can often happen too. When we talk down an economy, we say bad things, people start to get fearful. They start to pull back, and what happens? It actually creates the bad conditions. Now, sometimes it acts in the opposite. Sometimes people get up and say, as Ben Bernanke did in 2008, hey, everything's fine here. Don't worry about it. And we looked at that and said, that's not true. And it made people flee for the door, right? So sometimes emergent systems have the opposite effect of what we think they're going to have. That is why they're complex adaptive systems. They're emergent. The climate is another example of this. If you get beyond the politicians and the rhetoric, which has a certain degree of certainty to it, and you actually talk to a climate scientist, they always talk in terms of probabilities. 50 years from now, there is an 80% chance that the temperature will be within this range. They say things in broad probabilities. Why? Because the climate is a complex adaptive system. We're hit with a sunspot over here. It changes the humidity in the air. That humidity has an effect over here. These systems adapt and change over time. And their properties are wholly emergent. This is why you can get crazy things like a model that will suggest rises in temperature that will make large parts of the Earth inhabitable, and have other variations that maybe are on the 1, 2, 3 percentile where we induce the next ice age. It's because we don't know how complex systems are going to react to broad stimuli. Their properties emerge over time. When we look at natural systems, we can get an understanding of what a complicated system looks like compared to a complex system. There is no doubt that a cornfield is a complicated system. We go out and we plant seed, we water, we fertilize, we do it at certain times of the year. But no one is expecting when we plant corn that if it ends up to be a bad year for corn, that soybeans will emerge, right? We understand what we're doing. There's an input and an output, and it is almost mechanical in terms of what that interaction is like. A rainforest is wholly emergent. We don't go out and put a tree in and then expect to get a rainforest. If you want to create a rainforest, the rainforest emerges of itself. In fact, there have been areas where we've cut down rainforests, and then we've allowed that area to grow back in the hope that it will create a rainforest. And what grows back? Invasive weeds and other things that never will turn into a rainforest. People that have wanted to reseed rainforest type of habitat have actually had to go in and kind of manage these interactions and kind of nurture them up so that you get this scaffolding that can then grow and emerge and evolve into, over time, a mature rainforest. Cities have this same kind of interaction, complicated versus complex. And this is where I want to give you kind of an advanced notion of the difference between these two. That is subtle, but very, very important. When studying complex systems, one of the features that makes them complex is that they're generally short of resources. When adaptation occurs due to stress, when you give a complex system an abundance of resources, it ceases to act in a complex way, and it becomes merely complicated. In other words, when there's no stress, or when you can overcome stress easily because of an abundance of resources, you don't have to adapt and change. You're not forced to adopt a new strategy, change your approach, react to something around you. You can just continue on uninformed that you're doing something really, really dumb. An abundance of resources allows complex systems to become merely complicated. After World War II, we had a very specific objective. That objective was growth in our economy. We wanted to keep from sliding back into depression. Understand that no one understood what caused the Great Depression, and no one understood, and still really doesn't, how to get out of it. We tried things. Some things seemed to work a little bit. Some things didn't really. Again, it's a complex, emergent system. It defies easy prediction. It defies easy analysis. But what we knew very confidently is that when all these GIs returned from war, and we stopped making guns, and we stopped making tanks, and we stopped making munitions, that without that stimulus, with all this new labor, we were just going to go right back into depression. And we didn't. Because what happened? We took all that industrial capacity and we put it into this system of this brand new version of America. Let's build homes, let's build highways, let's build refrigerators and stoves, let's sell encyclopedias door to door. We created this whole new ecosystem of this new version of America. It created all kinds of wealth. And we can look back today, and we do with nostalgia, at the 50s and 60s as this time when one breadwinner could support a whole family. Families had unprecedented prosperity. In fact, I'm going to say something here now, and I want you to hear it in a generous, nonpartisan way. If we look back at the last presidential election, we had two 70-year-old candidates describing to us the best time in their life and how we could get back to that period of time. Whether that period of time was Ozzie and Harriet families and blue-collar jobs, or whether that period of time was an expansive federal government that could increase Social Security, could expand Medicaid, could take on the Great Society. Whatever version of that story you wanted to tell, it was a story of how productive and successful we were in this time when resources were abundant and we could do so much as a country. This is the complicated phase, right? This defies thousands of years of human history. Human habitat has always been a complex adaptive system. Up until present time, we have lived in complex adaptive frameworks. This is my hometown. I live in a little city called Brainerd, Minnesota. It's 2.5 hours north of Minneapolis, St. Paul. If you look at a map of Minnesota, it's basically right in the middle. If you look at a map with stuff on it, you'll see the Dakotas come into Minnesota from the west. You'll see Iowa cornfields come in from the south. and you'll see this great Canadian forest come in from the north. I'm on the edge of that Canadian forest. Lots of lakes, lots of trees. This is what it looked like in 1870, which is fun being out here on the east coast, where 1870 you consider like a new structure. This is what my town looked like in 1870. This is when we got started. This is the first iteration. I want to point out that if we could go back in time and take a snapshot of any of your cities at their very infant stage, at their founding, they would look a lot like this. Some pop-up shacks, some hopes and some dreams for what the future could be. Think about this kind of development for a second and ponder what happens if a development like this fails. What happens if, for some complex reason, it's the wrong people, or it's the wrong place, or it's the wrong time, and all those little things that make a city successful just don't emerge here? What happens to a place like this? It becomes a ghost town. It blows away. And a few people lose a little bit. They've spent a little bit of resources putting this together, but not much is lost. They salvage what they can, and they move on to the next place. When a place like this is successful, when it's the right people in the right place and the right time, success starts to emerge. And what we see is that you'll have growth. It will grow incrementally up, incrementally out, and become incrementally more intense. So after another 30 years, this little street would become this street here. This is in 1904. Now, pause here for a second. Imagine what is a couple blocks either side of this. What does that look like? That looks like this, right? That's the edge. That's the emergent part. In economic vernacular, those would be the upstarts, right? Those would be the poor, kind of bootstrapping people who are just getting started in the community. And they're hoping that over time, as this ecosystem, human habitat continues to emerge and grow, that they'll be in a position where their fortunes will be lifted as well. This is how cities provide something for everybody, a way to start with nothing and end up with something when we grow in this incremental fashion. After another 40-odd years, these 2- and 3-story wood structures would be torn down, and we'd become buildings of brick and granite. An incremental, emergent development pattern. One that, when we step back and we look at your city here, what we see is one that is a stage or two more mature than where we were at the end of World War II. This is where we reached at the end of World War II. I did an interview today, and I was asked to talk about the difference between New Hampshire cities and Minnesota cities. And I actually extended it out a little bit to California and Oregon and Washington State cities. And the big difference is, of course, you had more that had matured to this kind of more emergent state by the time we hit the end of World War II than we did. Ours was largely wood, and wood is very easy to tear down. You had less that was easy to tear down. If you go out to California, what you'll find is that their places, right at the end of World War II, are all gone. If any city has them, it will be kind of 2 blocks of tourist museum kind of thing. Come look at our silly old town, right? This is what we used to have, and there'll be places that, quite frankly, look like this, and they sell fudge and saltwater taffy and T-shirts out of it. But you reach this state of very mature development, iteratively, by the time we got to post-World War II. I want to give you some insight into the luxury that this has created for you. Because in this shakeout of cities struggling financially, and in the shakeout of, I think, our markets starting to come to reality with the fact that this growth pattern we've been on post-World War II is not only not viable, but is imminently starting to hurt in many, many ways. I want to show you the luxury you have of having so much great stuff in one place. These are two identical blocks. In my hometown, if you look at them, you'll see they're the same size, the same area. They have the same amount of public infrastructure. That block on the left still retains the traditional development pattern. In the 1920s, as my city was growing incrementally, this was the next increment of out. So what you're looking at here is the pop-up shack equivalent of the 1920s. Had things continued as they had for thousands of years, the people who lived in here would have anticipated that eventually they would have had second and third stories. The buildings would become more intense, more ornate. That didn't happen. After these were built, we had the Depression, then we had World War II, then we had a new style of development that just skipped right past these and started building hyper out on the edge. These places have stagnated for 90 years. 2 blocks over, it used to look just like it. It's the same size, it had the same development pattern. The city labeled it blight, got it torn down, and now we have the new taco drive-through. 2 lanes, large parking lot, sign. Everything about this externally, and certainly the conversation we had in our community, was that this was a really positive step forward. We got rid of blight, we got something new, it fit our current development model, it fit our vision for the future. We even put it on the front of our economic development brochure at the report at the end of the year, right? Look at what we're doing to get rid of blight and improve the city. Here's the key problem. That block on the left has a total value of $1.1 million. That block on the right, same size area, same amount of public infrastructure, same cost to the city to provide service and maintenance. The value's only $600,000. From a property tax standpoint, the city collects 78% more property tax from that old rundown junkie block than that one shiny and new. This is the same thing that we've done out on the edge. This is our biggest big box store. You'll see it's a double-sized big box, auto dealership right there, gas station right there. This is a 20-acre piece of property, most valuable piece of property in the area. On the right there is the 20 acres of our core downtown. If you've seen the movie Fargo, you've seen a not so flattering, but not so incorrect portrayal of my hometown. Culturally, it's but the view of it, we don't use wood chippers quite that way. Our downtown really struggles. Most of our second and third stories are unoccupied. Our first stories struggle to keep tenants. As I was in Rochester this week, and tell me I can't remember the other city I was in last, Claremont, thank you. Claremont, excuse me for that. There's a lot of similarities there. I felt very at home in those places, which are great towns with a lot of great stuff, but at the block level are really struggling. That's what this 20 acres on the right is like. A lot of buildings, like I said, in a state of lack of maturity by the time we got to tearing stuff down. We tore a lot down, and you can see the craters there, a lot of surface parking. When we look out on the edge, this 20 acres, $0.6 million an acre, but that 20 acres in the core downtown, 79% greater. Again, we're getting 79% more property tax from that 20 acres in the core downtown, that emergent part of our community that we have allowed to decline now for 70 plus years. That emergent part of our community pays still today more property tax than the best of the best out on the edge. I'm going to show you real quickly that these are not cherry-picked sites. This is part of a broader pattern. A good friend of mine named Joe Minicozy runs an organization called Urban 3. They do 3D graphic modeling of financial productivity. If you think of a farm field, the parts of the farm field that grow up the most productively, we say, that's the most valuable, that's the most productive part of the field, that's where you get the most bushels per acre. So what we're going to show you here is value per acre. Where's the most financially productive part of a city? This is Buffalo, New York. If you've been to Buffalo, New York, you know this is not, yes, I love Buffalo, New York, but it's not a hotbed of prosperity, right? Particularly the core downtown. Yet when you look and say, where's the core downtown, can you point to it? It still generates wealth, despite the decline, despite the neglect. This is a pattern we see in cities of all sizes. Here's another one in upstate New York, mid-sized city. Here's a very small town where I live. When I first went here, they said, Chuck, we've got great stuff happening here. We've got great stuff happening out here, but these neighborhoods here are awful. And then we showed them where all their wealth was. In those neighborhoods where all the poor people live. We have modeled hundreds and hundreds of cities across this country, and we see the same pattern in every one. This is a little bit different analysis, but the same kind of result. This is Lafayette, Louisiana. I was invited to participate with Urban 3 in a study of Lafayette. What you are looking at here is a profit and loss map for the city. We looked at every single expense the city had. We looked at every single revenue source they had. We mapped them all out. We mashed those maps together. And in the end, we got this profit and loss statement. Every tip where you see a blue parcel, that is a piece of property where there is more taxes being paid to the community than the community is required to provide in ongoing service and maintenance. Everywhere where you see red, it's the exact opposite. Those parcels pay less in taxes than they require in ongoing service costs. Those red properties look a lot like this. Those are the malls, the strip malls, the big box stores, the franchise drive-through restaurants, the gas stations, the curvy streets with the dead-end cul-de-sacs, the three-car garage with the attached house. All that stuff is in red. The blue in Lafayette, Louisiana looks a lot like this. Their downtown, again, because they are further west, their downtown was less mature by the time we got to 1945. And so what you see is locked in place, a less mature version of your city. Yet, even those parts that are less mature are financially really, really productive. That picture in the bottom right is one of the poorest neighborhoods in Lafayette, Louisiana. When we were going there to do our work, the city staff warned us not to go to that neighborhood, not to get an Airbnb there. They said that's where the burglaries happen, that's where the homicides happen, that's the bad part of town, stay away from there. Financially, it's killing it. It's one of the most profitable neighborhoods in the city. Chuck, how is this possible? And I get people who ask me this question, like, how is this possible? I want you to think like a poor person for a second. Think of you in a group of poor people going to build a city. And when you sit down to build a city, you know that you and a bunch of other poor upstart people are going to have to pool your money together to maintain the street in front of your house. How would you build your house if you had that core understanding that you and your neighbors around you were going to have to put in money not only to build that street together, but to maintain it over and over and over? Well, you would build your house very skinny and very deep. And if you go around your community, what you're going to see is that houses built a long time ago were skinny and deep. You have all these plats, all these developments where this is how it's built. Why? It's not because this is a great architectural style, although there's a lot of very innovative architectural things that can be done on lots like this. It's because these people were poor. They were frugal. They were prudent. They were building places that were going to be financially productive, not just in times of growth and prosperity, but also in times of want and need, which historically can be long, long extended periods of time. This emergent pattern that evolved over thousands and thousands of years of building human habitat was designed to be strong and resilient in good times and in bad. That's why you see this pattern over and over. Now, pretend that all of a sudden you find yourself with an abundance of resources. You cease to have stress and respond in complex ways. You can just overcome whatever malady you have with more and more resources. How does your house get built then? Well, you take that and you just turn it, right? Now you have a shallow lot that's wide. You have a big grass lawn out front where you can kind of showcase your wealth and affluence, like some British royalty. This is what we've done over and over and over again. We phased from a system that was complex with a lot of stressful feedback into a system that was merely complicated, where inputs equal outputs. When I was in engineering school, we were taught how to design a street, how to put in pipe, how to, basically build a city. And from an engineer's perspective, a city is merely a machine. It's input, output. We build a frontage road, we get Walmart and McDonald's and a strip mall. We build a housing subdivision, we get single-family homes. And it will forever be that way, world without end. This is a mechanical way of viewing the world. As a planner, we're taught, you zone this R1, you zone this R2, you zone this C1. Here's what happens. This only works with a massive abundance of resources. In complex adaptive systems, this is not how things work. This is not how success emerges. I said I would talk about transportation tonight, and I want to talk about it in this complex, complicated kind of framework, because our transportation systems used to likewise evolve in complex adaptive ways. If you remember back to those 3 photos I showed you of my hometown, the one with the little pop-up shacks, and then with the wood structures, and then with the granite buildings, if you actually step back and looked at the street in those, you'll see something remarkable, especially from our current lens. The first street was what? Dirt. Dirt. It was just a dirt street. But if you think about it, they were just little buildings. There was kind of a proportion there that made sense. The second iteration was also a dirt street, but it was a more refined dirt street. It was a graded dirt street, so it was, maybe you can think of it as a gravel street. But there was wooden sidewalks then along the side. You had a next evolution of the public realm in intensity that kind of matched the evolution of the private realm. In other words, the public stuff was adapting as well. In that third photo, do you remember what it looked like? It was a fully paved and surfaced street. There was a storm sewer drain in the middle. And so what you have now is you have structures that were granite and brick, and you had an evolved emergent set of infrastructure systems sufficient to handle that. There is a relationship between the two. In our complicated way of doing things, we build stuff all at once, and we build it to what we believe is a finished state. This is especially true with urban and suburban infrastructure. If you go to any city today that has a transportation plan, that plan will contain a drawing like this of a hierarchical road network. It will identify where your local roads are, where your collector roads are, where your arterial roads are. The idea is that local roads will connect into arterial or collector roads. The collector roads will empty into the arterials. The arterials will empty into the major arterials. We're all on the same page here. We all understand how this works, right? This is like transportation engineering 101 in a complicated system, right? I want you to think about this in this way. Ponder a river network. A series of little creeks and brooks run into small streams. Those streams flow together into rivers. Rivers flow together into major tributaries. We understand how a system like this works, right? And we understand that if we get rain out on the periphery, if that rain is sufficient enough in intensity, or if it's persistent enough over time, in the center, in the trunk, we will eventually get flooding. In fact, this is so well known to us that what have we done from a regulatory standpoint? We've gone out to these places because we know this flooding is extremely devastating and costly. We go out to these places out here and we say, you know what? You have to retain your water there. You can't just shed your water off and have it go into the ditch. You have to hold that back. You have to let it seep in. We can't just surge during every rain event. We can't do that. And so even though there's no real localized impact out here to filling in that wetland or running the water into the ditch, we understand that the cumulative impact of this is absolutely devastating. And so we've taken these steps to deal with that. Now, imagine a river network of a different type. One instead of water made of asphalt and concrete. Why, when we get rain out on the edge, are we absolutely shocked when we get a flood? Why do we find this so confounding? Why do we, like a dog chasing its tail, continue to do this over and over and over? I drove in on your soon-to-be 8-lane, right, expressway coming into town. And this is supposedly to do what? To cure congestion? Once and for all, you will defeat it, right? And what we understand that this is, right, when we build this 8-lane thing, we understand that what we're doing is what? We're creating more of these, right? That's what that policy does. It creates more of that stuff. And if you remember back to 15 minutes ago, where we looked at where the drag financially is coming in your community, it's coming from creating this. In fact, when we look at congestion as a problem, we understand that all that development gives us a little bit of that sugar high, but it creates enormous, enormous costs, particularly when we measure congestion costs. If we wanted to create a system that manufactured the maximum amount of congestion possible, this is how you would build it. This is how you would build it. You would take every street and you would run them all into each other, and you would force everyone to go to the same spot at the same time every day. This is why every city in North America experiences a rush hour. In my city, it's 5 minutes. But for 5 minutes, we have stifling levels of congestion. And if you were to go out and ask the people who are commuting to work during those 5 minutes, which it's a lot of people, if you ask them, they would say, we have overwhelming levels of congestion. We have intolerable levels of congestion. Okay? What congestion does to our complicated, non-adaptable systems is it destroys them. If you think of a roadway that has excess capacity, you as a user enjoy free flow of traffic. But as soon as you go one car over what the capacity is, everything goes to a halt for everybody. Again, not adaptive system, a complicated system, not an adaptive system. And so engineers react to this by doing what? We overproject and we overbuild. We overproject how much traffic we're going to anticipate, because the downside of being wrong is so severe that we overestimate. So these are actual engineering estimates for how much traffic will increase on a project where they were looking to get it built, and they said, well, in 1996 we sat down and we said, here's what traffic will be in 2020. And then we did it again in 2002 and then again in 2011. There's what traffic has actually done, right? We have no language as engineers for declining traffic volumes. It's not part of our vocabulary. In fact, here's this graph of nationwide. So this is all the interstate highways and the engineers' projections for them. And then the black line is what traffic has actually done. We have no way to describe this because we treat these systems as complicated, not as complex and dynamic. And for that reason, we tend to overbuild. We tend to over-design and over-engineer. And sometimes, because traffic itself is complex and adaptable, you know that if it's really, really busy at this period of time, but you wait a half hour and you can get there in 5 minutes, you wait a half hour. As soon as everybody figures that out, what happens? Now you can't wait a half hour, right? Traffic is adaptable. A bridge goes out. In Minnesota, we had the I-35W bridge collapse 10 years ago, 12 years ago now. Remember this? This is a major thoroughfare through Minneapolis-St. Paul. And everyone predicted apocalypse when things reopened. Because without this major thoroughfare, there was just going to be stifling congestion traffic on every other roadway. It never appeared. It never materialized. Why? Because the transportation systems we build especially the auto-based ones, we don't build them to be adaptable. But who's adaptable? We are. People started to drive at different times. They would take different routes. We adapted, and there was no underlying problem. Because we overbuild, we have these systems where if we look at them at rush hour, they're absolutely incoherent. So we have this one point in a day when everything surges and everybody has enormous congestion in a few core spots where everybody is. But if you could float up to 10,000, 20,000 feet and look down, the vast majority of what we have put money into building is completely underutilized at our peak period of time. This would be like the airlines sizing their fleets for the amount of traffic they anticipated, they anticipated at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, and then running empty planes the rest of the year. We would find this to be insane. Let me ask you a question. How do airlines keep from doing this? Yeah, they adjust with price, right? So at Thanksgiving and at Christmas, they charge more. And what happens? A lot of times, people will pay it because they want to travel certain days. But then people will fly red-eye flights. They'll fly a couple days earlier or a couple days later. They'll adjust their schedules. And things tend to work out, right? Maybe you won't fly on this airline. You'll fly on the budget airline or what have you. We're adaptable. The systems we've built are dummy systems that are not adaptable. I want to give you this other insight because I'm going to be doing this walking tour tomorrow, and for those of you that are there with me, I want you to get this in your brain too, because there's this concept of forgiving design that's become kind of an inherent part of how we build transportation systems, and it's just wrong. It's wrong. But again, in complicated systems, we have not been forced to face this fact and adapt. Understand, in the very early days of automobile and highway construction, what we did is we went out and we took the old cart paths and we put high performance surfaces on them. And you have crazy horizontal curves in this state, more so than as you go west, they go away. You go to California, there's no horizontal curves. It's just all gradual. But out here you have some, so you can appreciate more than others. What happens when you put a high performance vehicle on a high performance surface on an old cart path? You know, when you were building the cart paths and you came up to a huge tree, you didn't cut down the tree, you just went around it. When you came up to the big gully, you just went around it. And so all of a sudden we saw people going off the road, hitting things. The level of death and carnage was astounding. And so engineers sat down and they said, you know what? We can do something about this. We can design and engineer streets so that they forgive the common mistakes that drivers make. Again, treating these systems as if they're mechanical and if they're complicated. So what do? We said, all right, take a 2-lane roadway. We know that sometimes people driving, for whatever reason, they look down, they turn the radio, what have you, they're going to float a little bit. We don't want, when they float, for them to float across the lane and get in a head-on collision. So what we'll do is we'll widen out the lanes. We'll give them a little extra room. And then we know that even despite giving them a little extra room, sometimes cars will go off the edge of the road. Sometimes there'll be something there. They'll wind up, floating over on the side. What we want to do is we want to make sure they have recovery room. So we'll put a shoulder over there so that they can, have a little room to get back and recover. Sometimes, even despite having wider lanes and recovery room on the side, we know that vehicles are going to go off the roadway. When they go off the roadway, if they hit things, it'll be very traumatic. Going from even 30 or 40 miles an hour to a dead stop, it will create, huge trauma. And so what we did is we went out and we got rid of all the obstacles and cleared that out. And now we have a forgiving design. Let me make sure that I'm being clear. On open roadways, this is a genius innovation that has saved untold millions of lives. This is a very important advancement in how we built highways. The problem is, when we bring this mentality into the core of our cities, what we do is we induce higher speeds because we signal to drivers that, hey, we've given you a wide lane. We've given you recovery room. We've removed obstacles, except for those pesky people walking. We've removed obstacles. Go ahead and drive fast. And so the parts of your city where I've experienced today people driving very fast are places where we have adapted highway standards. We have taken highway standards and we have put them in this kind of complicated mechanistic kind of way to work in areas that are more complex than that. We have a saying at Strong Towns, if you need a sign to tell people to slow down, you designed your street wrong. We have a lot of incorrectly designed streets because we've provided these kind of simple mechanical standards to environments that are far more complex. I put this in here because I love doing this and I wanted to do this with you tonight. I really want you to leave this presentation empowered to take control of the future of your city. I really want you to feel like when we look at cities as human habitats, when we look at them as complex adaptive systems, the experts are you. When we look at them as mechanical systems, the experts become the people who run mechanical systems, the engineers, the planners, the economic development people, the people who look at it as input, output, mechanistic connection. But when we look at them as complex adaptive systems, what happens is that the power kind of shifts here, and the expertise shifts as well. You are an expert on the way you use the city. You are an expert on your street, your block, your house, your business, your structure. And that is all part of this complex adaptive human habitat. So here's what I want to ask you. First I'm going to share this. When engineers go out and design streets, they will tell you that they are not applying any values. That their approach is valueless. I am going to tell you that that is incorrect. The engineering profession itself has embodied in its design approach a number of subtle values, and I'm going to go through them here. When an engineer is going to design a street, the first question that we ask is, what is the design speed? What is the speed that we are designing for? The second thing we ask is, what is the volume of traffic we're expected to handle? So we'll go out and do a volume study and figure out how many cars are going to go through here. Then we take the speed and the volume, we go to the design manual and open it up, and we say, given this speed and given this volume, what is a safe way to build this? And then we say, what is the cost? These are the 4 steps that engineers use to design the public realm throughout our cities. I want you to think now of the complex human habitat you live in. The streets, the places you go to eat, the places you go to shop, the places you take strolls in, the places you live. And I want to ask you, and this is the public interactive part of this, I'm going to ask you to name for me the value that you hold highest. And we're going to do this all at the same time. So if you were looking at these 4 values, which one do you think is most important? Would it be speed? Oh, hang on, we're going to do this together. Don't jump the gun. Do we value speed? Do we value volume? Do we want to make sure that the improvements we make are as safe as possible? Or are we worried about being cost effective? Say speed, volume, safety, or cost.
Safety.
Okay? If you had to mediate between these other volumes in your complex human habitat, if you had to choose between making sure traffic could travel at speed, that we could handle a certain volume of traffic, or that the investments we made were cost effective, would you prioritize speed, volume, or cost?
Cost.
I can't change these as we go, so this is why this is always fun. If you had to prioritize now, do you want to make sure that the cars moving through your city are able to move at a set speed? Or would you rather make sure that you handle a set volume of cars? If you had to prioritize between speed or volume, which would it be?
Volume.
Do you see what we did here, generally? We took the values that are being applied mechanically to our public spaces, and we had a general consensus, a couple small exceptions, but general consensus, to completely invert them. To completely invert them. I've done this hundreds of times, and I always get the same result, right? It's the same thing. We want our places to be safe. We're willing to sacrifice speed to make them safe. That is not a trade-off embedded in your current design approach. I want to point out something that may be tangentially applicable to you, but I think the spirit of it is absolutely applicable to you. There's a model of building streets now that has become prominent called complete streets. Many of you are nodding, so I'm assuming you've heard of this in some way. A complete street is a response to kind of the despotic way that we have tended to build streets. Despotic for people who are not in vehicles. If you are not in a vehicle on most of our streets today, it can be very scary. Cars are induced to drive fast. There isn't space designated for you to walk. And so the idea of a complete street is that we're going to have space for everybody. So for people walking, there's a space. For people biking, there's a space. For buses, there's a space. It's like Oprah, like everybody gets a space. You get a space, you get a space, right? Complete streets accommodate pedestrians within an auto-dominated environment. That's a huge step above where we've been. That's a huge step above where we have been. And so I think we can applaud the Complete Streets initiative. But productive places, strong towns, those places that were blue on the map, those places that are complex human habitat, they accommodate automobiles in spaces dominated by people. When I go through the core of your city, when I go through the surrounding neighborhoods, those were places built to be dominated by people. The adaptation we're looking for, the complex feedback we're looking for, happens not in the application of mechanistic standards to move vehicles, but in the complex interaction of humans. I was asked at one point, like, would you ever close this street? Like close it off so we could have a pedestrian space. And my answer was, I have no clue. Are there pedestrians here? Or as we would like to call them, are there humans here? If the volume of humans is so high that they're overwhelming the street, yeah, now it's time to close it off. That's an adaptation. And maybe we close it off just on Saturday nights, because that's when the volume of humans is so high that closing it off would work out really well. If you remember back to the 70s when the pedestrian mall was cool, you guys had one of those, right? And the theory of planners was, wow, we've destroyed our places by building cars, so let's build this one little tiny place where we'll have people dominate. And it was artificial. It didn't work. It wasn't responsive to humans. But if we go out and look, yeah, if people are overwhelming the sidewalks, they're overwhelming the public space, that might be time to close that off for that bit of time and then see what happens. Do it with cones. Cones can always be removed if it didn't work. Do you see what I'm saying? Adaptation. We have to embrace it. I had a sneak peek ahead because I couldn't remember what to put in. Let me show you. I love, there's an architect named Leon Creer, and he is an absolute genius. And he did this little doodle, and we have shared it on our Strong Towns Facebook page. I blew it up here, so it's a little out of contrast. But I want to give this to you as a way to transition to talking about what we can do differently. And we're an hour and 5 minutes into this conversation, so we will go quickly through the rest of this. He has this picture of a mature city. And I want you to Imagine, well, let's step back and say this. How many of you like this place? I love it, right? Like I go around your town and I'm like, this is so beautiful. It's so gorgeous. This is wonderful. Imagine that is this. This represents the best of your city. Which, you know, if we go back and we look at like when your city was at its most beautiful apex, let's imagine that, okay? This is what he calls overexpansion, vertical and horizontal overexpansion. The idea of growth, which remember, complex adaptive systems grow. So this is not an anti-growth conversation we're having tonight. It's a very pro-growth. It's about the method we use to grow. Complex adaptive systems grow. This is showing a complicated system growing, an overexpansion. So there's a hyperexpansion out. There is selective hyperexpansion up. Let me give you a contrasting model. And this is, again, Leon Creer's drawing, which I think brilliantly encapsulates a complicated approach and now a complex approach. Organic expansion through duplication. I'm going to ask you a question now. I don't expect an answer. I want you to just think it through. Why, when you have such a beautiful city, with such beautiful spaces and beautiful buildings, why would you build such trash in other places? Why have you not chosen merely to just duplicate the beautiful stuff you have? We can go out to California, and I can sympathize with them for building In-N-Out Burger and Walmart and junky subdivisions, because it's not like they can just walk 2 miles up the street and see beautiful near perfection, but you all can. What are you doing? Like why I'm not joking you, in Minnesota, some people who are really into urban design and urban form and building great cities, they'll actually pool money together to send public officials to Europe to look at European cities. Now, we would benefit from that here to a degree, but if you went to European cities, what you would just see is like nice versions of your city. What we would see is like a completely different model. You would just see a nice version of your city. What I love about Leon Creer's drawing here is that what he's suggesting is that you built something fantastic. Just keep building that. Just keep doing that. We were on one street today where there was a big empty space, and there's a discussion going on about, well, what should go here? What should it be? What are people demanding? What do people want? And I said, well, why don't we just build that? Like, what is on the other side of the street? Like, do people like that? Yeah. Okay, well, that's pretty awesome. Let's just build that, right? This is not complicated. And I think we've locked ourselves in because we've kind of become beholden to the mechanical approach of growth and the mechanical approach of building cities into looking at our cities as complicated. And we have to look at them as complex, as things that we have the capacity to build. So here's my humble recommendation for all of you. I don't have solutions to the problems you face. I don't have like a 3-point plan for here's how you fix this. The engineer in me would say, here's the one thing you should do that would cause this to happen. No, we don't do that. I'm going to give you some ideas for how you start to, again, create emergent complex systems that will help you solve and address your most stressful urgent needs. And the first one is that you need to allow the next increment of development by right everywhere. This is often where these conversations go off the rails, because there's all kinds of people who are sitting here going, yes, I love what you're saying. Yes, I get it. Complex adaptive systems. The city's beautiful. Let's do it. It's great. And then I come to you and say, and your neighborhood has to change. And you're like, no, never, never, never. Over my dead body. Complex adaptive systems are defined by their ability to adapt over time. And if you don't allow your neighborhoods to incrementally change, you're going to kill your city. You're going to kill your city. So we need to allow the next increment of growth and development by right. And let me throw this caveat in here, and then let's talk about this a little bit deeper. At Strong Towns, we talk about it like this. No neighborhood should experience radical change, but no neighborhood should be exempt from change. It's a trade-off. You have an urban renewal site, and your vision for that was radical change. Let's tear all these buildings down, and then let's create something brand new and wonderful in its place. And you tore the buildings down, and then it was decades till something came back. And now what are you getting? Let me, as someone who will leave and depart tomorrow, as someone who is your friend, I'm going to tell you if you've got ketchup on your face, right? We're friends in that way. You're building one generation ugly boxes that do not reflect the high quality of your community, that are able to be built because they can get Wall Street capital, and they can be funded, and they can go up very quick, and it looks like success and it looks like prosperity, and it probably pencils out well in the short term on your balance sheet. But you're building the future slums of your community in a way that is not adaptable, not replicable, not consistent with who you are. And I was very saddened when I saw it. I was very saddened. No neighborhood should experience radical change. We should never take a neighborhood of single-family homes and drop an apartment in it. We should never take a neighborhood of single-family homes and drop a condo unit in it that is, towering over everything. We should not take your beautiful, gorgeous downtown and put 8-story, 12-story buildings in it. We should never do that. But that single-family home neighborhood, we should never say no to a building becoming a duplex. In your core downtown, we should never say no to a neighborhood of 4-story buildings getting a 6-story building. We have to allow the next increment of evolution. And that's hard for us to get our minds around, because one of the things that we like about the mechanical systems of city building we've created is we perceive them as stable. They're highly unstable. They are... Just because we lack a word to describe that kind of instability doesn't mean it's not there. We understand systems that are kinetic and are changing, but what we've done in our mechanical way is we've suppressed change artificially. That doesn't mean that the energy goes away. It just builds up and builds up and builds up until it explodes. That is what we've done. We've suppressed change. We like that as humans. We're uncomfortable with messiness and chaos that comes with complex systems. But if we want our cities to be strong, we want them to endure, we want them to be prosperous places, we have to allow our neighborhoods to flex and change. The radical shift up is doing more damage than you think. This is an example that I like to show. It's from the West Coast, but you can interpolate here. I want to walk you through an exercise, because oftentimes as planners, we think if we don't want all this stuff to change, in other words, we want to keep all these single-family home neighborhoods as single-family homes, never to change, but we got to have growth because we have people, we've got 10,000 jobs in the downtown, we've got 30,000 workers, I'm sorry, it's the opposite, 30,000 workers, 10,000 people living in the downtown. We need more people living here. We've got to create stuff. So let's go out and build something huge. Let's zone this site for a huge, huge leap. That's a standard thing that we do in reaction to stress in a complicated, try to manage something that's complicated. So here's 3 lots. One lot has a single family home, one lot has a condo unit, and one lot is a vacant property. Let's pretend that you own the vacant property and you're going to sell it. What price do you ask? Well, you can look over at the single-family home, and you can see that the single-family home is worth $200,000. And if someone's going to buy your lot and build a single-family home, they could maybe pay, I don't know, $30,000 for it. But then you look over at the condo unit, and you see that the condo unit's worth $10 million. And you realize that if someone's going to buy your lot and put in a condo unit, they can probably pay $1.5 million. Which would you rather have? Right? Would you rather have 1.5 million, or would you rather have 30,000? So now we've set the value of the lot. Now look over at that single family home. How much is that worth now? Yeah, it's not worth 200,000 anymore. You have created some really weird distortions in your property market. By artificially suppressing the next increment of development and then zoning for these large leaps in random spaces, what you've done is you've created a system that has artificially increased your housing prices in ways that somehow feel comfortable to you, because if you own a house, you're like, wow, my house is worth a lot more. But in that kinetic versus built up stress kind of way is not viable over the long term. We have price to income ratios historically of around 2 to 3. So 2.5 is kind of a good rule of thumb. You can buy a house that is valued at 2.5 your income. When we look back throughout history, that's been a pretty stable ratio. Nationwide now, we're over 6. Your region is even higher. These are not stable numbers, because if you don't have the income, you can't pay the amount. The only reason you can pay the amount is if the price keeps going up. Do you remember 2008? 2008 became a crisis not because property values dropped, but because they ceased to rise at the rates needed to allow us to stay in them. You've created a really artificially distorted property market here. And I fear for what happens when that buried stress and energy comes to fruition. I think we need to start embracing a more adaptive type of approach, one that is more responsive to what is actually going on in people's lives. We need to lower the bar of entry, along with allowing the next increment of development by right. No neighborhood should experience radical change. No neighborhood should be exempt from change. We need to consciously go out and lower the bar of entry. This is a house. It's not a tiny house. It's not a little house. It's not a substandard house. It's a house. If we want to put an adjective to it, we can call it a starter house. If we go around through your neighborhoods, we can still see remnants of starter houses. Oftentimes they've been added on to, as starter houses were. It's very common in the past for a house to be 400, 500, 600 square feet, that being the first iteration. When a family had kids or got a bonus at work or saved some money, they would do an addition, maybe a second story, maybe put a porch on or what have you. These are called houses. And when we say, no, in order to build a house, it must be financeable on the secondary market, it must contain 2.5 bathrooms, it must contain 4 bedrooms. What we've done is we've raised the bar to a point where a whole bunch of people can never enter into our system. Complex adaptive systems have a place for everyone to start. That's part of their nature. And it's important for us to recognize, Wendell Berry writes about farming, and Wendell Berry made a statement once that I read that said, if you're compassionate for the poor, you have to allow subsistence farming. And there's a little bit of discomfort in that, because we look at subsistence farming and we say, oh my gosh, what a sad way to life. Let's ban subsistence farming. But then what happens? You either have to get to the bar above that somehow magically, or you fall below it. And below subsistence farming is worse. If we don't allow people to get into a house and build their way up, what we wind up with is people who can't participate in our system. The same goes for commercial properties. I mentioned Muskegon, Michigan at the beginning. This is a street in Muskegon where they had a vacant lot, and they were struggling to get businesses into their downtown. You don't have that problem, but you do have a problem in some of your neighborhoods where you've zoned out commercial and you don't allow it, with getting new start commercial in your neighborhoods, which you need for successful neighborhoods if they're to grow, if they're to mature. What they did in Muskegon is they said, okay, These vacant spaces aren't working. They're too big for these entrepreneurs. They've got too much overhead costs to go in. They went out and put up a bunch of storage sheds, painted them funky colors, and then rented them for $200 a month. What this did is it allowed people to get in at a very low level, try out their idea. You had someone there when I was there who was selling soap. There's no way they're going to go into a downtown place, renovate it, put in a sprinkler system, ADA, the bathrooms, and all this stuff, so they can try to see if people would actually buy their soap. It's too much risk. It's too much burden. But they got started in a storage shed, and the storage shed connected two parts of their town that were kind of struggling, filled a gap in a really smart kind of way. And a lot of these entrepreneurs have graduated now from these spaces. They proved their business model, and guess where they are now? In those empty, formerly empty spots in the downtown. Affluent communities struggle with this kind of thing because this feels beneath us. We should have a grant program for that. The state should come help us with this. There should be some type of foundation or nonprofit that can help people get a start. No. If you actually want to do this, you have to become a little bit uncomfortable and allow the starting point to be emerged in your city. You struggle with this. Every city struggles with this, but it's fascinating to me that even the most affluent city struggles with this. We, again, treating our cities as mechanical, complicated systems, have done a really bad job responding to how humans actually use them. I'm going to give you a couple examples of this. Your bus system, I don't know intimately, but I know what it's not doing. It's not making your city wealthier. It's not serving your people. It's not providing a lot of value. If you're interested in this topic, I would refer you to the city of Houston, Texas. The city of Houston, Texas had a bus system that was pretty pathetic. It served a really wide area with very poor frequency. So if you had no other option, you could get on a bus out here and ride it for 2 hours, switching buses along the way to get to someplace where you wanted to be. The problem was very few people had the tolerance for that, and so very few people ever rode it. What Houston did instead is redid their system, and they asked a fundamental question: where are people and where are they trying to go? And what they did is they prioritized high frequency service between where people were and where people wanted to go. And so instead of having buses going to all kinds of places where nobody was at, driving them to places they didn't need to be, and having them take huge amounts of time to get to where they wanted to go, what they did is they created things like circulator loops. I look at your neighborhoods today, your neighborhoods that need to mature, that are right outside of downtown, and I think a loop that went through these neighborhoods in your downtown where I could walk up my door and every 10 minutes I could get on a bus. I don't have to worry about whether it's going to be there or not. I know it's going to be. And I can get to the downtown. Now, when you talk about building an 8-lane highway to fight congestion because you've got tens of thousands of workers trying to drive in every day, they should not, that's a waste. It is a waste of your money that is also bankrupting you when you could use that money in capital in a different way to create a really high quality of life and mature your city in place. You know how many bikers I saw today? I saw 0 today. 0. Now, maybe there are some around. I'm sure that on a typical day, some people are nodding, yes, bikers, yay. I saw 0. In my town today, it snowed. I can guarantee you I would see bikers in my town. And I'll tell you, I'm gonna venture in a kind way, I guess. The bikers that I would see in my town are really, really poor. Like really poor people. They bike, they don't have an option. They gotta get somewhere. Here's a fascinating thing. If you want to lower the bar of entry, you want to create a city that is dynamic and adaptable, you should be looking at your streets as adaptable themselves. Right now, they're serving cars. Over time, they're going to increasingly serve humans walking and humans biking. And that will mean a slow evolution, block by block, of moving space from being automobile space to being non-automobile space. I brought up Montreal on our walk today as a place that has really matured in place very nicely and has done so with a series of protected bike lanes that are widely used by young people, by old people, by all people in between, by rich people, by poor people. It's a great network. And they've done it by, over time, solving their congestion problem by adding more people and more stuff, while also adding more options for people to get around by walking and by bike. You cannot build your way to prosperity with automobiles. It can't be done. If it could be done, we would have done it. We can't do it. We have to start thinking about how these spaces be adapted and retrofitted over time to prioritize human traffic on bikes and by foot. This is, I think, my last slide. And it goes to this question of observing and responding to people in our city. When we get past looking at these systems as merely mechanical, as merely complicated, as input and output, we realize that the city itself, the public process for making improvements, needs to become iterative as well. Not only do our neighborhoods need to adapt and change, but our city, our public process needs to be part of that. Right now, when we're going to do a project, what do? We dream up a project, we go look for funding, we get it all lined up, we go out and we have public hearing and public engagement and try to sell people on our idea, and then we either have the courage to go forward or we cower in fear and do something else. Here's what I'm suggesting a complex, adaptive city would do. The first thing we do is we go out and we humbly observe where people struggle. And I'm going to pause on that word humble for a minute, because the idea that we're trying to denote with humility is to say we go out with our minds suppressing what we think is the problem. We go out and we actually observe. How are people using the city? Where are they having a hard time? How are they struggling day to day in this complex human habitat that we've built? We then ask the question, what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? Not what is the ultimate solution that we can do, not what is the federal grant we can apply that will solve this for all eternity. We say, here's a struggle we see. What is the hack that we can go out and do right now to try to make this a little better? The third step then is we go do that. We do it right away. We don't subject it to 6 months of public debate and discussion. We go and we do it. And then we watch and see what happens. Because what happens is that people will start to respond and they'll iterate too. And then what do? We repeat that process over and over and over again. We are done building static systems. We are done building static government. We're done building things that don't evolve and adapt. We have to start thinking as a public, as a culture, as governments, as humans living in this complex environment. We have to start thinking of it in that way again. And if we do that, if we're willing to open our minds to this, if we're willing to embrace it, not only can we make fantastic public investments that are low cost, low risk, and very high returning, but we can build places that are amazing to live in, amazing to raise kids in, amazing to grow old in, and just flat out prosperous for everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. You're lurking.
Well, I'm going to be the mic runner.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, is there a mic to
there a
run?
second mic?
Oh, okay. A couple very quick things, because I get in trouble if I don't say this. My staff will actually watch this video if it's uplined and then upload it, and they will say, Chuck, you didn't. So a couple quick things. First of all, I have a book coming out in September. It is available for pre-order right now. It is the Strong Towns Conversation. If you are interested, you can go and get it right now anywhere, including our website, strongtowns.org. You can order it through there. We have annually put out books that are a collection of our best essays. If you are interested in those, I've got Volume 2 and Volume 3 up here. They're $10 each. You can come up and grab one and just put your money there. I trust you to make change and take care of it. I also have to say, if you are inspired by our message, if you think that the Strong Towns movement is important, the one thing that we ask you to do is to go share this with somebody else. We are trying to change the conversation about cities and growth and development across this continent. And the thing you can do that would help us out most is go and tell someone who's not here about these ideas in your words. If you are very, very inspired by what we do, we are a member-driven organization. Membership funding is about half of our budget. We use those monies to share this message as broadly as possible. If you want to support us, you can go, we're a 501c3 and become a member of our movement. If you are very, very, very inspired, here's what I'll ask you to do. Pick something you're passionate about here and go work on making it better. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be flashy. It doesn't have to involve running for government or serving on a board. Just pick something that you're passionate about and go work on it. And if we all do that just a little bit, it's amazing the energy that can be created. So go ahead. I'm happy to stick around and answer questions or do talk. I know we're going to get kicked out of here in a relatively half an hour or so. So does anybody have a question or something they'd like to chat about?
Well, as the mic runner, I'm going to ask the first
Oh. I guess.
I'd like for you to address parking, about parking minimums, about requirements, how we decide how many parking spots each new building needs. If there's
Yeah.
a formula for that, thank you.
There's a really simple formula. Needed parking equals 0. That's the essential equation. There's a book by Donald Shoup that you will not read, and anyone who's told you they've read it is lying. It's about this thick. I have read parts of it. I've chatted extensively with Donald Shoup. He's kind of the nation's parking guru. He's a genius. He will tell you 3 things, and I'm going to forget all 3. His core thing is that we need to not require people to build parking, A. B, where we have public parking, and we need public parking in places, I think as a transition strategy, we absolutely need public parking. But we have to charge the market price for that parking. We have to charge the market clearing price. So by that, our price needs to be high enough to where there's vacant spaces available. That's how we determine how we're doing. That's the feedback. And then the third thing is that parking money, listen close, should not ever be general fund money. It shouldn't be general fund money. That parking money should go back into improving the neighborhood where it was collected. That's the key. It's a little bit like the smoking tax. You know, we charge a smoking tax. Why? Because we want people to quit smoking. And then we put the money in our general fund. And then when people quit smoking, we go, oh my God, we don't have any money. Start smoking again. We're putting a parking fee not so we can fund our government, because we don't want our government to be dependent on people parking. we're charging a parking fee so that we can manage parking in our neighborhoods and help those neighborhoods evolve and mature to something more prosperous and successful. And if we don't use the revenue in that way, we're doing a huge disservice to the places where it's collected. And we will subsequently do bizarre things like build huge parking ramps isolated from everything around it out on the edge of town. What, have you done that? Please, go ahead.
First off, thank you very much. This was terrific.
Thank you.
Let's throw you right into a state controversy.
Okay.
There has been extensive discussion over the last couple of years about building a commuter rail system, not so much from here in Portsmouth, but more over toward Concord, Nashua, Manchester, down into the Boston area.
Yeah.
Without prejudicing.
Yeah. What do I think of that?
Yeah.
I love rail projects. I think rail projects are great. I think when we throw the adjective commuter on it, I start to freak out because commuter rail has generally meant rail to park and rides, which is like a really expensive way to induce more of that development that's bankrupting you. If we had rail that went, let me just as a big picture talk about transit for a second. Transit works really well when we connect a place people want to be to another place people want to be. When we're trying to get rid of auto trips, when we basically slide back into that complicated model of highway engineering, we screw up transit. When instead we respond to where people are, we do transit brilliantly. So when we talk about commuter rail, I think a commuter rail from the heart of a city or the edge of the heart of a city to the core of Boston would be brilliant, would be fantastic. If instead you're going to run it from the back of a big box store parking lot to another, suburban subdivision where you put a little bus stop in and have, a couple things, you're wasting your time, money, and energy. Connect your cities with rail. That would be a genius thing to do. That's, by the way, what our ancestors did, and they were brutally successful with it. If you could get on a bus, on a train here, and get to Boston, what a great thing. And I think that that would be a huge moneymaker for all of you. Let me say one other thing about transit, and you can actually translate this to highways too if you wanted to, but we've not had any taste for doing that. If you look around the world at where great transit systems are built new, not old legacy systems that are modernized, but go to China or Japan where they're building brand new high-speed rail systems. How do they do these? Because we're baffled. We don't know how to do this stuff. What they do is they will go in, let's say take Japan for example. The Japanese entity, government entity that is doing this will go in and they will buy all of the land within a mile or so of where they're going to put the rail stop in. They'll purchase all of it. They'll acquire all of it. Then they will put this multi-billion-dollar improvement in. The value of the land will go up tremendously. Then they will sell the land and they will use that money to pay for the rail line. Now your fare box doesn't have to cover capital costs. It doesn't have to cover interest. We don't have all these ridiculous conversations we have about, well, transit doesn't pay for itself. All your fare box has to cover now is the operation and maintenance, which is very easy to do at a reasonable price. If we were serious about transit, this is what we would do. If we were serious about highways and making highways pay, we would do the same thing too. When we put in an interchange, instead of creating a bunch of land speculators, making them rich for no reason, basically transferring public money to private hands, we would acquire all of that land, or alternatively, we would assess the costs to all the people who benefit from it. Why don't we do that? That's nutty that we don't. Are you all happy giving some random landowner who's, just happened to buy the land where we're gonna put the interchange in, a huge payday. It doesn't make any sense. And even if you take the social part of it, the way we pay for this stuff, we'll raise your gas tax and then we'll give that money here to a bunch of, it doesn't make any sense. If we were rational about how we did it, we would use the public improvement we make to improve land value, and we would capture that land value to pay for the improvement. That is the way societies all over the world do it. Okay, please. Did I answer your question on transit?
Yes, you
Thank you.
spawned 6 more questions.
Okay,
but
good.
I'll
Okay, good.
I just have a quick question. I've been to Portland, Oregon a number of times. Their public transportation system is incredible, and I know it's been really growing in the last few years, but can you speak to, they've done a really good job. There's lots of different ways to get around the city, and it's a real biking culture as well.
Yeah.
And, how could we even just in a small way do something like that? I don't even know where we would start.
I love your enthusiasm. I feel like you have latched on to the right parts of Portland. Portland, Oregon, not a fan. And the reason that I'm not a fan, I really take issue with some of the ways that they phase things. And really, if you get outside of the Disneyland, the planner Disneyland part of Portland, it is some of the worst you're gonna see in the Northwest. I mean, they've done everything that every bad Western city has done in terms of just the horizontal auto nasty development. They also have done, and the reason I showed that Portland image of the condo and the single family home is they have stagnated their home prices and really artificially priced out large swaths of their population in the name of top-down centralized planning and execution of complicated transit systems. So, love your enthusiasm. I think your question was, how do we do that here?
Or how do we do something?
Something like that here.
Something, because they have a lot of different transit
Yes.
Opportunities.
Yes. My opinion, I think you start with what you have. I would, myself, repurpose your bus system to be more responsive to humans in your city as opposed to geographic areas. I would try to create some type of circulator system around and through your downtown and your core neighborhoods. I would look at where people are biking now. I would look at where people are walking now. And I would say, how do we, where they're there today, expand that and make that easier for them? This is part of going out humbly and observing. I think there definitely are streets that could have dedicated bike lanes today where you don't have them. I would resist the idea of letting planners do that in a meeting. And I would suggest that you do that by being out and observing where people are biking, because then you're gonna have improvements that will automatically be successful and also will build on each other. So I get back to that like iterative thing. I think we have to be very careful, and this is where I think Portland's gone off the rails, no pun intended. I think they got seduced by what like the ultimate thing would look like. And really, emergent systems, we can have a vision for what they might look like, but if we work iteratively, we'll correct our vision along the way to match our people and what is gonna work best here. Portland is a financial basket case, and you do not want to end up where they're at right now. So iteratively, respond to people. You can do it, and it will be gorgeous, beautiful. Please.
There's one more minute, one more question.
One more question.
It was a very good talk, and thank you for it.
Thank you.
I heard you engage in a cost-benefit analysis that focused on the cost of certain kinds of infrastructure.
Yeah.
But is there a way to get more granular? For example, hypothetically, let's assume that in the city, there was a drumbeat among certain people for commercial development based on the thesis that would drive down the tax rate for the homeowner.
Sure.
Can you get more granular? Is it feasible to look at a cost-benefit analysis to see through the master plan or whatever, which sort of commercial development does benefit the city financially and which sort does not?
I'm not sure that I fully know where you're going with that. I kind of sense that if you're talking about, like would an accountant be better than a candy shop? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
I mean, an office versus a hotel.
An office versus a hotel
A
versus.
seven-story
Yeah,
building
yeah.
requiring a fire truck with a ladder, more police with bars.
Yeah. Okay. My gut response is that's not how I would do it. I'm not going to say that it's impossible, but a lot of what you wind up doing when you go down that path is you wind up making projections. And I actually find projections to be a very flawed way to build a city. What I would prefer to do is really two things. One, look at other examples in your own community and use them as kind of your benchmark. Okay, they built a hotel here, here's kind of what it's doing. If we put another one in here, maybe it would do similar. But I think more important than that is we need to build things that are fundamentally adaptable. If you look back at traditional development patterns, they were all at their core fundamentally adaptable. Single-family homes were fundamentally adaptable. They could be adapted to be multiple units. They could be adaptable to have a little bit of commercial in them. Commercial buildings are just boxes. The idea that this is a residential box and this is an office space box and this is a hotel box is kind of silly because outside they're the same box, they're just reconfigured on the inside. I think the idea of, and I know there's discussion on office space here, and today I saw this thing where we were looking at a hotel. I think, again, we've been captured a little bit by the mechanical approach of centralized systems, including Wall Street finance. This city used to be full of hotels. None of them were financed like Holiday Inn is financed with their certain model, and here's the amount of restaurant space we have to have, and here's the gym. And do you know what it was? It was someone who had an old office building downtown and was lacking tenants and said, I'm going to make 3 of these spaces into overnight hotel rooms. Again, it was incremental and evolutionary. If you go to, and I hate to say it this way because sometimes I discredit myself, but if you go to Europe, where they have largely kept the traditional development pattern, you're hard-pressed to find a hotel that looks anything like our hotels. Hotels, first of all, bed and breakfasts are everywhere. That is a really standard transient model. And it's a really standard transient model because if your spouse dies and you lose an income stream, all of a sudden now you can make that up by renting out one of your rooms. If your kids graduate and go off from college and you need to fix the roof but you don't have the money, you can go get a loan and then run a little B&B. These are everywhere because it's a very resilient, adaptable model for humans to use to make ends meet. If you look at what are actual hotels then, the hotels are often adapted office space or adapted apartment residential tenement kind of space. There are very few places where they've gone out and intentionally built a hotel. I think today with Airbnb, with the way we've kind of quasi-adapted our spaces to allow this, I would be very leery about going all in on like a hotel model that was not adaptable. If someone wants to come in and build a hotel, but it clearly could be adapted to something else in the future, it meets our streetscape, it fits with the design, it's not too huge, so it's not like a monolith on a big lot, come in and do it. But if it's kind of the, whether it's a hotel or whether it's, some other thing, if it's not an adaptable kind of structure, I would be very leery of it, very leery. Despite whatever projection you could come up with. We are out of time.
We actually,
Oh, you gave us extended
we have
time.
an extra.
Ah. Okay, thank you to the time gods for giving us a little bit more. Anybody else? If you have to go, I respect that, so.
So we're kind of a city of a timeline.
Yes.
But we have really wonderful old fabric, and then we have sort of an era of urban change around the urban renewal in
Right.
the 60s, and now we have what I call Portsmouth's most recent era of city building. But it's not really city building; it's city scale building, but it's not city richness
Right.
building.
Right.
And I'm just, what are you seeing and feeling as you look around and see our, sort of coping strategies for trying to manage that?
I see.
think there's a general discontent with the recent era of kinds of projects. And, it seems like there ought to be a different way.
Let me take that in a slightly different direction, because I feel the same thing that you described, and I think I said earlier that I felt sadness over the stuff that's being done on the urban renewal site, the very large buildings that seem out of proportion to the character of your, not very respectful of the character of your community. I'm assuming a lot of people in this room would call themselves historic preservationists. Often cities like this tend to be full of people who embrace historic preservation. We don't want this building torn down. We don't want this building demolished. We don't want this building changed or altered. We want to keep the historic character. These buildings are 100 years old or 200 years old or what have you. I am sympathetic to that. I'm sympathetic to that, even though I don't call myself a historic preservationist. Again, if you go to Europe, you will see buildings much, much older than anything we have here on streetscapes that are gorgeous, and they look old, they feel old, they have the character of that community, yet many of them were rebuilt right after World War II. Those that weren't have been adapted to new uses. They will retain the facade or the character or certain characteristics, but they will be remade into new buildings. We are the only society that has an historic preservation movement the way we have it. And the reason we have it, in my opinion, is because we have torn down beautiful things and replaced them with awful things. And I think if we were tearing down if we were tearing down things, even if they were nice things, and replacing them with things that were even better, we would have no tolerance for historic preservation mindset. Let me give you an example of this that is disturbing to people, but I think is apropos. If you've ever been to Charleston, Charleston's one of the most gorgeous cities in North America. If you have not been there, go. It is beautiful. It is well worth your visit. You will walk through historic Charleston, and you will be charmed by the just gorgeous buildings, the wraparound porches, the vines growing. It feels just so delightful. It's beautiful. I'm going to ruin the trip for you now. We have put this area under glass. We have said this area will never evolve and change. It is as it is and ever shall be, world without end. This is it. But if we had never tried this suburban experiment, if we had continued in the traditional development pattern, all of that would have been torn down by now. It would all be gone. But what would be there, instead of 6 blocks by 6 blocks of historic Charleston, you would have 30 blocks by 40 blocks of stuff that looked like historic Charleston does. And in the place where you have historic Charleston today, you would have the next iteration of something absolutely gorgeous. What would that look like? I can't even imagine in my mind if you take these beautiful buildings and say, mature them to the next phase. What you have in Charleston is a beautiful adolescent whose growth was stunted and never was allowed to blossom into a full human. And we marvel at it, we think it's gorgeous. And it is gorgeous. But imagine if instead of one adolescent, you had 100. And imagine if they were able to grow up to be mature human beings. How beautiful that would be. That's what we've done. And I think if you look at your city in that way, we should protect what's here now. We should not indiscriminately tear down buildings, particularly if it's to build parking lots and to build things that are of lesser value. I'm with the historic preservationists there. But over time, the city should mature, thicken up, fill in, and there will be pressure to start renovating and expanding existing historic structures. And we need to find a way to embrace that if we are to have our city become the adult version of what it should be. Maybe one more?
For real, last question.
Okay.
You've referred quite a few times to European cities, and when you talk about maturing versus adolescence, do you mean contemporary architecture? Do you mean mixing the old and the new?
This is where I'm on ground I'm not comfortable with, and I'll answer it that way. I am not an architect. I'm not an architectural critic. I think my knowledge of architecture is very immature. I've had the ability or the luxury of being able to travel and view some great cities with some wonderful architects. And I have been astounded to have them describe to me things that I was never seen. I got a tour by some of the country's top architects of New Orleans, and buildings that I thought were hideous. They explained to me what the architect was trying to do and how they were trying to do it. And even though it didn't really improve my view of the building, I came to appreciate what went into it and why it was done in the way it was done. So when I talk about European cities and the development patterns, it's in my mind, I'm not thinking modernist architecture or, you know, new, I'm kind of a classicist in the sense that, like Leon Creer, we built this, it's beautiful, let's continue to copy this pattern and mature it. I would like New Hampshire development to be different than Massachusetts development, to be different than South Carolina development. I think there's an architecture of place. But I wouldn't, I guess today as Chuck Marohn, go so far as to say we should ban modernist architecture, or we should ban this kind of architecture or that. I don't know. And other people who might know more would have stronger opinions on that, and I kind of feel like that's for you to work out. But I'm less confident that I know the answer to that. Thank you.